Ottawa has announced two pretty major programs. One is the Major Projects Office. The other is Build Canada Homes. Now, I build real estate now. I've put lots of deals and projects together in the past, raised money. So I'm going to go through these programs and discuss how these will actually work in practice. So to start, I'm going to go into each of the first 5 projects that were proposed by the Major Project Office and give you a bit more context around each one. The Major Project Office is brand new. It was just announced in August 2025, and the whole idea is to speed up permitting and the whole process for getting giant projects off the ground. They call it one project, one review, and I think the idea is to streamline the process by combining what would typically go through multiple agencies into just one major office. It's important to the feds that they get Indigenous support on these projects, so they've got a few initiatives around that, but one of them is increasing a loan program from $5 to $10 billion, and in my understanding, it's to give loans to First Nations so that they can become equity partners in these projects. Generally speaking, that seems like a good idea to me. I would just be curious on what the transparency looks like. Are these loans going directly to the project, or do they have to go through a chief first? We've heard of stories of corruption, so I'm curious how effectively this money is going to get into the project. Now, the Major Project Office, keep in mind, it's coordinating projects that are already in existence. It's not creating new projects. It's looking for what's already been proposed by the private sector and seeing how Ottawa can just speed things along and potentially even become a partner in some of them. Okay, first off, let's go to the east. Let's go to Montreal. The Port of Montreal Contrecoeur terminal, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, is a major Canadian port already, but they're looking to increase capacity by up to 60%. For context, the port's already handling about 1.5 million containers a year. They call them TEUs, which is like a 20-foot unit. So imagine just a very typical shipping container, which is about 35 million tons of cargo. So a ton of volume is already going through this port. Now, port traffic is roughly half and half imports and exports. And as you can imagine, the provinces that are utilizing this terminal the most are Ontario and Quebec, which accounts for about 80% of capacity, with Quebec alone being about 50%. Major exported goods are grains like oats, flour, cereals, even lentils, just saw an 18% increase. Plus, they also handle forestry products and a little bit of steel. Now, this port's major. It connects Canada to 140 different countries. And Ottawa estimates that during construction, it's going to add about 8,000 construction jobs and 1,200 permanent jobs afterwards. And they're estimating it's going to have about $140 million of economic benefits to the province. And that's every single year. Now, the question I have is that even though the private sector is the one leading this investment, there's still going to be a lot of public sector investment required. Railways, roads, and that could be a very expensive bill for the federal government. And you could say that about all of these projects that we're going to discuss today. Generally speaking, I'm supportive of investing in infrastructure, especially if it's for something like this that could get these major projects off the ground, but it could be extremely expensive. And given the fact that we haven't seen a budget yet, I'm nervous to see what the numbers are going to look like. If the world wants our goods and we can have a business case to be made to expand the port, I'm supportive of that. Next on the list is LNG Canada Part 2. Now, LNG Canada, it's up in Kitimat, British Columbia. It shipped its first LNG to Asia this year, which historically is significant because until now, we shipped 99.9% of our gas directly by pipeline down to the United States. Now, by expanding LNG, we're now connected to the Asian market, which generally has higher prices for natural gas. So producers in Canada are going to see a lift in their revenues from this. Now, something to note is that this project actually doesn't have Canadian ownership at all. Shell owns 40%, Petronas is 25%, PetroChina is 15%, Mitsubishi is another 15%, and Korea Gas is 5%. It first started construction in 2020, but we didn't see the first shipment go out until 2025. So that shows you the scale of the construction required. Now, the initial capacity of LNG Canada 1 was 14 million tons a year. LNG Canada 2 could double that to 28 million. Now, I mentioned this is going to make it more economical to produce gas in Canada, so I'm curious to see how that would impact local businesses, local residents. You could see prices going up. So generally speaking, this is going to be supportive of the overall economy, giving us money for healthcare, roads, infrastructure, all the things that we know and love. One of the big environmental benefits of this is that it's supposed to displace coal use in Asia. Whether that remains to be true is tough to say. The amount of new energy supply they're bringing on board is so massive that it would be shocking to see an overall reduction in emissions. But moving on next to the Darlington small modular nuclear reactors. Now, this one's pretty exciting. I'm very supportive of nuclear. It's good to see that we're giving it a push. Small modular reactors are a somewhat new technology. Instead of being these massive structures built on site, they're built in factories, shipped in parts, and assembled at site, bringing the cost down. And these things can pack a lot of punch. If they build these 4 reactors, that can power about 1.2 million new homes. Something to keep in mind with nuclear is its base load. That means it's always there when you need it. If the sun is not shining, the wind is not blowing, you still have this base load power. And it's a clean energy source because it doesn't emit carbon. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions around nuclear. Some people are scared of it. those have been overblown. I won't get into that in this video, but I'd encourage you to do some research. There's a reason we're getting back into nuclear, and the world is. China is building a ton of facilities right now. We're partnering with international vendors to get these machines. I would love it if we had our own local supply chain where we could build them ourselves. That's just clearly not in the near term. Major companies like GE and Rolls-Royce, that's who builds them right now. Now, wind and solar might cost less per megawatt to build. You just have to remember they're not baseload, so you need something else. And typically, natural gas is something that's very common for establishing that baseload power. Nuclear, it's a carbon-free alternative. Now, this is a pretty big move. We could be the first country in the G7 to actually have an SMR running, so it's pretty exciting. Now, moving on to Saskatchewan, let's talk about the McIlvena Bay Mine. Saskatchewan is already a huge exporter of minerals. $10 billion just being shipped to Asia in 2024. Major products are potash for fertilizer, uranium, and oil. Germany's K+S is investing $3 billion in a potash mine in Saskatchewan. And the copper zinc deposit at McIlvena Bay was added to the major projects office list. Now, this project's going to add a lot to output and add many years to the mine's useful life. And even if you're an environmentalist, you'll realize that for batteries and electric cars, things like that, you're going to need these minerals. Moving on to BC, the Red Chris mine. Red Chris is currently operating. It's a copper gold mine in northern BC. It's owned 70% by Newmont, 30% by Imperial Metals. In 2024, they produced 85 million pounds of copper and just under 60,000 ounces of gold. Now, the expansion that the major projects office is looking at would increase output by 15% every year and extend the mine life by about a decade. Expanding mines obviously doesn't come without risk, so I'll be curious to see what level of environmental assessment is done on this project. Now, all these projects combined add up to $60 billion of investment in Canada. And these projects already existed, as I mentioned. The major projects office is just selecting projects that already have private investment. They've already got a business case. They already have some momentum, and it's just trying to speed them along. Now, there is a level of irony that the Liberals made a new bureaucracy to try to speed things up when perhaps they could have just reduced regulation, gotten out of the way, and had the same result with less government oversight. But all in all, I'm happy to see these projects. One thing I will say I don't like is that you don't want an office that's picking and choosing favorites. You ultimately want the private sector to do that. This creates risk of conflict of interest, personal biases, things that you want to avoid, especially when the projects are so gigantic in scope. Also, as mentioned previously, this is going to require a ton of public money because every single one of these projects is going to need infrastructure to make these accessible. What is that going to cost the Canadian economy? It's tough to say. The one big thing that stood out is that there was nothing to do with oil pipelines. And the irony is that's our biggest export, so I am a little surprised that it was completely left off the first list. As a developer of real estate, I want to talk about the new agency called Build Canada Homes. September 14th, this was announced with a $13 billion initial budget. In the first phase, they're going to build 4,000 factory-built modular homes, and many people did the quick math, 13 billion divided by 4,000 homes, and realized it's over $3 million per home. However, the entire project is supposed to expand up to 45,000 homes. Now, it's not clear, will that require a larger budget? It's tough to say. But from that $13 billion, remove $1 billion that's allocated to transitional housing and another $1.5 billion that goes towards rental protection, where they're essentially buying apartments that would be otherwise demolished. Do some quick math, and the actual amount is less than $300,000 per unit, assuming the budget doesn't change and the number of homes is that full 45,000. That makes more sense when you're using federal land. The land cost is essentially zero. You can build, depending where you are in Canada, let's say $350 a foot. That will change a lot province to province, but it actually makes sense. Now, they really claim that these modular homes are going to cut construction costs, speed things up, which is true. You build something in a factory, you generally get more efficiencies, but something they're glazing over is that I've looked at modular built for my certain projects that I have going on right now, and it's not that easy. You need something that has access to all the proper infrastructure. It's a very uniform level site. A lot of sites that you look at just aren't a good fit. So I'm curious to see how this actually works out in practice. I'm also curious to see how this impacts people like me when we're already having a difficult time sourcing high quality trades. Is the government now going to become a competitor to the private industry? What I think is a much, much bigger problem is how slow the municipalities move through projects now. And like I said, I have a few underway right now. The one thing the city does quick is collect fees. I think what they need to do is find a mechanism to speed up permits. Let the private sector build. A lot of homes are ready to be built, but developers, the risk is just now too high. The demand is not there, so they're scaling back right at a time when we need more construction. So I think it makes more sense in many situations for the government to get out of the way. However, I'm a broken record. I say that about a lot of things. I'll be curious to see how this operates in practice. I do understand why the federal government would get involved specifically for low-income housing or affordable housing. I can understand that. I'm just curious how the balance is going to work between public building almost versus private building. All in all, I would generally consider these a win, though I've made the argument that I would do this much differently than how the Liberals are choosing to do it. With all that said though, no matter how you slice it, this is a significant impact that is going to accrue to the Canadian economy. And it's something just to sit back, watch, and hopefully we can all appreciate some of the benefits of these projects.